Hello! It's yesterday at 12 o'clock. Welcome here. Today, I'm finally explaining something I reference all the time to my friends and have never been able to actually elaborate on, and that's the Ryder Archetype. If you don't know, a character archetype is a category of character. They're a type of character that can be seen over and over, like a mannequin wearing different clothes, but always posed the same. The surface, personality, and maybe even importance is different, but the vibe and function is the same. I talked about this more in my video about the sickle family and referencing your own writing. Basically, I really liked looking into character archetypes over my time as a writer, and how interesting it is that familiar patterns can appear in distinct and very different pieces of media. What I didn't realize for a long time, though, is individuals who write or even draw can end up creating their own, personal character archetypes, intentionally or otherwise. So I wanted to use today to explain my sordid history with my oldest personal character archetype, the Ryder Archetype. To the Speedpaint. Chapter 1, Origins. Alright, so, when I was a wee lad, I began drawing, a tale as old as time. Since even back then, I loved drawing myself, and inserting myself into fun or interesting situations and worlds. I had this character that would occur in my art a lot back then, who was supposed to be, to put it frankly, me but cool. It was this dude with tan skin, a bright teal shirt, a cool jacket, and the most obnoxious neon blue hair that covered one of his equally bright blue eyes. The design was simple enough that my baby hands could draw it as many times as I wanted, and I drew this a lot, but it was just distinct enough to make part of my brain excited by the idea of that being me. I even started dyeing my hair blue and growing it out longer to try to have it cover my eye. I bought that exact annoying teal shirt, and for a whole year I only wore the color blue in an attempt to achieve the level of coolness that this look invoked in my childhood mind. I have memories of people at school literally knowing me as the blue kid, often before knowing my own name for a good bit. It was a lot. I was very attached to this character, and I started to use it more and more and more. I played with this little guy in every piece of media I enjoyed. Undertale? Yep. Alice in Wonderland? You know it. Custom Minecraft skin? Of course. Roblox avatar? Definitely. Steven Universe? Yep. Even got a special sapphire version for that. Ugh. Even random art challenges online were not safe for my little guy. I remember making a full series of Inside Out-esque characters that were all just this, but different colors. They all also had an edgy shtick. The red one was an evil demon, the yellow one was a paranoid fraud, the purple one I think the purple one just killed people. Overall, just absolutely stellar characterizations. But sometimes, if I put the character, or rather the self-insert Sona, in places or worlds that I liked enough, I would give that version a distinct name to help me identify it. The biggest examples of this are Aqua and Blue. Aqua was a cool, gender-neutral teen living in Gotham City with no parents, and Blue was... well... Chapter 2. Blue. Drawing apps have existed since the dawn of making apps, most of which are nothing special. However, in late September of 2015, the world was graced with a very special drawing app called Framecast. This program had a very simple concept. It was a social media program with a similar format to Instagram, but it was specifically made for and to be housed by young artists and animators. The free app allowed for mostly rudimentary hand-drawn animations, but had a lot of potential with seemingly infinite amounts of frames, the ability to record any audio you wanted and import it and animate over it, and the whole social media aspect of posting, commenting on, and generally sharing your work with the internet and other artists who were largely of similar skill levels as you. Framecast even had a feature of competitions, which I remember really fondly, where any random person with a certain number of followers could create an art prompt and friendly contest. Anyone could join in on the fun and post a drawn or animated entry, which would then be voted on by any and all users who wanted to submit a vote. The winners would then get little trophies on their profile and often a reward of some kind from the host of the competition, along with just bragging rights and prestige in the community. Framecast, like many apps, was better in theory and in discussion than in practice. I would describe it as similar to lmao for a lot of reasons, most of which are not the point of this video, more of an if you know situation. But Little Me was focused on the mind-blowing Undertale fan animations advertised on the App Store for the app, and I decided to download, thus beginning what was technically my first dip into the pond of content creation. Upon creating my account, I was immediately fascinated by the idea of being an online figure. I wanted something identifiable to use across my work, including in my profile picture and my username. My instinct, naturally, was to use this little persona that I had been using for a while, but it didn't feel enough to me. I needed something more identifiable than just blue hair over the eye, so after mulling it over, I remembered that little art challenge I did and decided, why not go with demon-type imagery? Demons are usually depicted as red, so it would be cool to be the blue demon. And thus, with a combining of those colored guys from earlier and a quick doodle of some wings and horns, I made my new favorite character. The name I settled on, creatively, was Blue without the E. He became a mascot of sorts for my art, and is to this day one of the characters most personal to me. I did everything I could think of with him. He was one of the first characters with likes, a personality, interests. He had a Monster High style cast of friends. I even gave him a signature of a little bee with a horn at the top and used it as my watermark. You can still sort of see how that transitioned into the logo I use most often today. Blue was an excellent mascot and truly one of the first places my creativity really found a place to focus. A sort of muse. Soon enough, after many drawings and character profiles and all that stuff, I wanted him to be even more distinct. I wanted to think about even more things for him, to sort of bring him to the next level. I looked for concepts I had yet to delve into with him, and I ended up on the doorstep of some very dark topics. But hey, I hadn't explored them yet, and why not try? What could go wrong? Chapter 3. Angst. I'm gonna make a video about this eventually because it's a pattern I saw in myself and then I keep seeing repeat in other newer writers. But as a kid and an amateur writer, I decided what was better to write about than something excessively dark. I didn't know how to really build up a story that could stir emotions, but I knew that certain things would inherently stir a reaction, both in myself and in potential readers or viewers. So I made the brilliant decision to have the mascot of my account, which mind you had like 2 whole followers, go through anything and everything. You want a sad, edgy boy? Gather round. Let me tell you about the abuse, the religious trauma, the self-hatred, the crying not interesting enough for you? How about extremely in-your-face knife imagery? Self-immolation, general discussion of depression and mental illness and suicide that I was too young to even fully understand? I've got your back. Yeah, it was something. I even managed to freak out my parents because some posts had descriptions that were supposed to be from Blue's perspective, almost like diary entries, and my parents saw the comments that I was getting and naturally misinterpreted and were very afraid. After literally a sit-down talk with my dad about the implications of my work, specifically the parts I was handling with little grace or care due to my lack of understanding, I finally realized what exactly I was doing and swiftly took down the darker posts and made Blue's actual story a lot more vague. Once I had fixed Blue by, doing more research into the stuff that I was writing about and making sure I actually knew what I was doing and wasn't being crass or disrespectful in any way, Blue actually became pretty popular, which is really fun and shows the importance of being careful with your writing and knowing what you're doing before you write grimdark angst. Take it as a cautionary tale. But anyway, what did carry over is a redesign of Blue into this creepy, melting ghost concept. He had big, inky black eyes and constantly flowing black tears, and honestly became pretty iconic, despite the incredibly unadvisable start to his characterization. It was to the point that he even garnered himself some full-on fan art from people about 10 times better at art than I was. I saved a couple of them even back then. I made myself a little community of friends over on Framecast after this, and it was really fun. Though, as all things must, my time on the platform came to an end. Other than a brief return about a year later, I deleted the account and moved on, now having a distinct separation between how I drew myself and how I drew the character of Blue. I mostly used him as an example of what a developed character of mine could look like to my newer, real-life friends who also liked drawing characters. So, who's Ryder then? Chapter 4. Clones. My leg went numb. With Blue in the bag, especially after learning from the edginess spiral, I was now familiar with the type of character that I felt I could write, and really, really liked to write about. Hi, welcome to Writers R Us. What can I get for you? Give me a cool-toned guy who struggles with communication and vision. Make sure he's a pessimist, and add a good sprinkling of fruitiness. Oh, and put a shit ton of hair in his face. And keep the backstory sufficiently tragic. Now give me more. I wrote this character over and over. The first Blue clone of sorts was Blake, the e-boy prince from the colorless kingdom, a land of black and white where only sad, poetic things happen, like getting bullied so hard you lose vision in one of your eyes. Just like with Blue, I was so completely obsessed with Blake. I thought about him constantly and made a bunch of people from other kingdoms, usually with just as edgy backstories, to be friends or enemies or lovers with him. My sisters were a huge help in this, as I would play different games as these characters, and they wanted in on the action, forming little trios with me. The trio we played the most often was the Edgelords: Blake, the stuttering, mysterious prince of the colorless kingdom; Faith, the winged, vampiric demon princess of hell; and Melody, the mature, ghostly princess of shadows. Alexa, remind me to make a band called the Ghostly Princess of Shadows. I loved Blake so much, and still do, but one clone was certainly not enough, especially as the story of these princes and princesses was gradually actually becoming something. This would eventually bloom into my Everrealm franchise, specifically Realm Academy. All I knew at the time was that I loved Blake, but I needed something new. I needed someone to be friends with a few characters who aren't buddies with the Edgelords, but had the potential to be just as angsty. Thus was born Remy, the deaf fairy of the Crystal Caverns, and Ryder, the blind boy with powers of the night sky. Or sometimes he had powers over basically like the Arctic seas, kind of. But that didn't stick around for very long, so just pretend he had night sky stuff the whole time. Side note, Remy and Ryder were an iconic duo, but there was a third member of their little best friendship circle who I remember like nothing about, but she was my younger sister's character, and all I actually remember about her was that she had no arms and was like the most fun. I just had to mention her because she was an icon. Anyway, this is where a few interesting things happen. I stopped playing games as the characters and decided to fully dive headfirst into making the little plot concept and characters I held very dear in this universe into a full-blown writing project. My little sister was not interested in that transition, so changes needed to be made. First of all, the trios for the most part became duos, and the roles of protagonist and antagonist both shifted around and were fleshed out, or at least an attempt was made to iron them out. The role of antagonist was assigned to the character of Joy pretty quickly, the popular sweetheart whose image was just a little bit too good to be true, an embodiment of sickly sweet. With the formation of the story and Joy as the antagonist, I ended up creeping back toward that door of dark, shock value topics. I still didn't really understand how to write a plot, but the idea that characters would slowly start going missing one by one until a climactic final battle where 90% of the characters all die tragically certainly seemed like it would invoke emotions as good stories are supposed to. Once that idea came in my brain, the door was burst open once again for me to go as dark as I saw fit. And this time, Ryder, who I redesigned to totally not be an accidental modernization of ye fabled persona of old, was my main outlet. Blake certainly got his fill of angst too, with his backstory being altered from just being a kid who was bullied to instead being a kid who was bullied and raised in a death cult by his just psychotic evil mother. The basics, you know. Ryder, on the other hand, was bullied and also neglected and also gayer and also edgier, with big black cracks that ran up his arms and inky black eyes for some unknown reason. Ryder was the adopted younger brother of this cruel model influencer guy and had a whole bunch of other mysterious, edgy things going on that I don't even have the time to explain in a way that would make sense. But importantly, Ryder also became the inciting incident for the sequel story. Because if you thought everybody dies means the story is over, you're clearly not thinking big enough. Melody, despite the major change of renaming her Melanie, largely stayed the same, still being a princess and still having shadow magic. My two favorite character traits. She was one of the few characters who was meant to survive Joy's attack at the end of the first story. So what happens after she becomes queen? Well, she has kids. Kids who have the potential to have just as edgy a story as their parents. With the largely bare-bones prompt from my sister of twin boys, the red one is sweet, the blue one is sad, my brain, subconsciously this time, went, oh my gosh, a sad boy character, I know exactly the vibes to go with. And thus, Cyrus was made. He had big black inky eyes, and clearly we're seeing a pattern here. I was hit with a rude awakening to this pattern when my sister and at the time writing partner began dissing me and, for lack of a better word, passive-aggressively berating me for the character of Ryder specifically. Arguments began to happen, more than one, stemming from the ideas I had pertaining to Ryder and what I wanted him to be and do. I wanted the sequel story to really have a story to it, not just a setup, pause, and sudden ending, because I was advancing in my writing. I made Ryder into this figure of a plot driver, where he wasn't just an emo kid anymore with a bunch of unanswered questions, especially because that was the type of character that filled nearly every slot in the entire Everrealm universe at that time. Instead of just unanswered questions, Ryder was made into this creation by these immortal, mythical monsters in the universe, who wanted to see what normal life on planet Earth was like. That's why he had the black eyes and the cracks and the other things. He was part monster, and it was harboring within him. Because he was connected to these things, rather than dying during Joy's attack, Ryder was taken back to the domain of these monsters, though now in a sort of limbo, wondering if he was more monster or more person, and if the human part of him did die that day. No matter how cool the concept, Ryder continued to be a point of contention and eventually was deleted from the story when I rebooted it and officially named it Everrealm, where it started becoming what it is today. As of now, Ryder stands as the character who caused the most controversy in my life and is the only character in the archetype to have officially been scrapped. Hence the name the Ryder Archetype. It's in honor of what he was. Chapter 5. Nowadays. In the modern times, I still have a really special place in my mind and my heart for this type of character. I still associate them with coolness, and I still, whether intentionally or not, gravitate towards a similar pool of features when I need to write an angsty character. Cass from a one-off story and Lawrence, who I'm drawing now from my D&D campaign, are the most modern additions to the cast of Ryder Archetype characters. The good thing, though, is that they're actually distinguishable now, even from the other characters who started as just another Ryder, like Blue, who's still around, or Azzy, which has been Blake's name for the past few years of development. The archetype itself, I think, is a fascinating show of my development as a creative. Like I said earlier, I'm far from the only person I've known who, especially as an early writer, wrote down just the darkest things they could think of. But the characters over time who have fit into this little box show how I've gotten better at writing and figuring out how to write those types of topics effectively. Thinking about the whole process was encouraging because I didn't realize how much it represents my growth as a creative and a writer. Lawrence, I think, is a realization of the Ryder archetype's potential. His story is dark, but it's weighty. Its more angst-filled parts draw you in, while simultaneously maintaining a sort of poetic meaning to it all. He's morally gray and casts spells, and he's self-sacrificing, with magical burn scars up his arms that creep onto his chest, and he has familial trauma that follows and haunts and actually motivates him. He embodies a collection of traits from old Ryder archetype characters and is a much better written version of them. He has Ryder's dark marks and elements of his origin, combined with Blake's family trauma and Blue's depression and self-immolation fire thing. He's very far from perfectly well written, but his complexity makes him fascinating to me and other people who interact with him and his story. He's such an interesting central NPC in D&D because everyone has a different opinion of him, and all of their opinions are valid, which, if I may say so myself, is a sign of a well-written character, at least with my current understanding of media and writing. Can you tell I'm just as obsessed with Lawrence as I am with the other old Ryder archetype characters? I didn't even mention some of them. I wanted to keep it in the very clear pipeline that is Blue, Blake, Ryder, Cyrus, Lawrence, but know that there are more out there. Hopefully, that long-winded explanation can finally sufficiently explain why these old drawings of different characters look so similar, and what I mean when I say this is a Ryder archetype character. The blue color scheme is really a hallmark of the genre, along with the sight thing. I didn't even realize how none of them had good vision until making this. But yeah, all that aside, I hope you enjoyed this video, a good long one, it seems, and I hope you all had a wonderful day yesterday. Please remember to drink water, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.